Hi, I'm Tristan Naumann, a principal researcher in the Biomedical Natural Language Processing Group at Microsoft Research. Today I'll be talking about domain-specific pre-training for vertical search. While I'll be presenting, I want to acknowledge that this work also reflects the efforts of my colleagues in the Deep Learning Group and the Productivity and Intelligence Group, as well as our clinical collaborators. Specifically, in the next 10 minutes, I'll be talking about vertical search and challenges moving from general search scenarios to vertical search scenarios, our approach that leverages domain-specific pre-training, and finally, how this research resulted in a research prototype, Microsoft Biomedical Search, that you can try out today. Vertical search refers to search across a specific subset of content or within a specialty domain. These vertical search scenarios arise frequently, and we may be familiar with them from our daily lives for activities such as shopping, booking travel, or finding reviews of our favorite restaurant. But many specialty domains require vertical search, whether that's because users want to restrict their results to a specific type of information or because of the way we can tailor tools to facilitate these search scenarios. A few cases in point. Microsoft Academic allows users to identify academic literature and provide a robust set of tools for navigating and filtering the results. PubMed is provided by the U.S. National Library of Medicine to facilitate access to abstracts of biomedical literature, and the Library of Congress provides search over their expansive collection. While these are just a few examples, they illustrate some of the key advantages of vertical search. First, domain knowledge can be leveraged during the search in order to provide more relevant results. Second, domain-specific search scenarios can be created. So, for example, in biomedical search, many meta-studies often include a notion of literature over time, and so PubMed is able to expose this information that might be irrelevant in the setting of a general search. Third, improved precision of results. So, for example, in biomedical search, if the goal is to identify a relevant paper, returning academic articles only will provide improved precision over mixed results. So let's talk about a few challenges exemplified by vertical search, specifically the lack of a domain-specific language model. In a biomedical context, this is a function of a focused audience of medical experts who use specialized language. And while recent advances in large neural language models demonstrate huge gains in the general domain, medical language can be sufficiently dissimilar that issues arise. Second, a lack of relevant signals. In our case, establishing relevance relies on the assessment of a narrow audience, and we don't have large-scale click logs to intuit their behavior. The result is limited access to two resources that are commonly used to establish relevance. And last, a lack of semantic understanding. So even after combating issues with out-of-vocabulary words, there can be semantic differences in the words that experts use. Consider a term like ACE that might show up commonly in the general domain. Well, this might bring to mind a deck of playing cards or professional tennis for me. A medical expert probably means angiotensin converting enzyme. So how can we overcome some of these challenges? For Microsoft Biomedical Search, we propose an approach that leverages domain-specific pre-training. Namely, we use domain-specific text in order to form a domain-specific language model, and this serves as a starting point for language models that better reflect our domain. Next, we use weak supervision and automatic data selection to identify materials from general domain that best resemble our target domain. And while potentially noisy, these labels are crucial in mitigating the lack of a relevant signal that we have otherwise. Last, mechanisms of dense retrieval and neural indexing, which can provide similar representations for search queries that might look dissimilar based on their keywords. And we use this to mitigate a lack of semantic understanding. Let's jump into them with a bit more detail. So first, we'll talk about the development of a domain-specific language model, PubMed BERT, which is trained specifically on domain-specific text in the biomedical domain. At a high level, modern neural language models are able to leverage unlabeled text. They do so by using a form of task-agnostic self-supervision. For example, in the biomedical text shown, there is no label, but we can imagine constructing meaningful tasks for self-supervision. In this case, masked language modeling involves masking words from the unlabeled task and forming a prediction task around recovering those words. In doing so, masked language modeling enables bidirectional training using a positional embedding to account for sequence. And unlike traditional language models based on conditional probabilities, these are able to take into account longer range dependencies that may not have been previously tractable. As we can see again in this example, by masking the text, we can ask the model to learn a representation that is contextually based. Much existing work in the space suggests that transfer learning plays a crucial role in the success of such language models. Typically, a base model is formed by pre-training from a large corpus, and specialty models are derived from the base model by continual pre-training. For example, a general domain language model might undergo continual pre-training on a biomedical corpus to form a biomedical language model. This reflects a form of mixed domain pre-training, where the hope is that the general domain's volume will improve the quality of the specialty domain model. This makes sense for a number of domains, especially when the size of unlabeled data are limited, but not for biomedicine. PubMed and PubMed Central have a considerable amount of data, with over 30 million abstracts and many millions of full-text articles. So instead of adopting continual pre-training, we challenge the assumption that using knowledge from the general domain is better and decide to train from scratch. This is motivated in part by other works like SciBERT, which train from scratch on scientific text, including PubMed and computer science papers. In order to create a resource truly specific to biomedicine, we'll train on PubMed alone. To see why this approach might be advantageous, let's take a look at the vocabulary, which is a fixed size set of frequent words and subwords used by the neural language model to learn contextual meanings. As we can see in this comparison, biomedical text differs substantially from the generic one, and we see this represented in the models and the way that they break words. Specifically, we see that for PubMed BERT, many common biomedical terms appear in full in the vocabulary, whereas they're broken in some of these other models. Next, let's talk about the second challenge, a lack of relevance labels. To understand the difference in relevance labels, it helps to consider the difference between general domain search and specific biomedical search scenarios. We note that at web scale, click and label data are abundant, while they're substantially lacking in a target domain. In this case, we're considering a specific type of biomedical search, namely COVID-19 search. Therefore, we leverage weak supervision methods to automatically select data from the larger web-based domain that best resemble our target domain. And specifically what we'll be doing is we'll select labeled query document pairs from the general domain Microsoft Machine Reading Dataset, MS Marco. And while this contains a large number of labels from the general domain, we can use a biomedical resource, such as the UMLS and medical ontology, to filter this down to instances containing diseases or syndromes. A selector then identifies relevant passages. While the result is a smaller, noisy dataset, these query document pairs can be passed to the ranker for improvement in our target domain. And in turn, an evaluation with a small set can be used to further refine the data selector. The result is a substantial improvement in the relevant signal over our target domain alone. By subsequently tuning this with our comparatively small evaluation set, we're able to use what's possible from the general domain to improve our performance in the target domain. Finally, we use methods in dense retrieval and neural indexing to provide similar representations for search queries that might look dissimilar based on their keywords. In this example, a user might search for a term like heart failure. It's important to understand that results discussing myocarditis will be relevant as well. Dense retrieval methods take advantage of representation learning to allow us to assess similarity based on meaning rather than keywords alone. Of course, doing this for every potential query document pair would be intractable, so we also use neural indexing to make this process tractable and possible. Now that we've discussed some of the key areas of our approach, let's talk about how we turn that into a research prototype, like this. A first consideration is a system architecture. On the left, you'll see an overview of the Microsoft Biomedical Search system. Specifically, there's a front end that serves the user experience and provides a cache for frequent queries. There's also a backend that comprises an L1 retrieval step based on BM25, an L2 ranking step based on the domain-specific neural ranker constructed using the mechanisms we've described previously, and finally, machine reading comprehension pieces. All of these are served up using Kubernetes, and on the right, you can see a referenced cloud architecture for servicing the backend. And with that, I want to thank you for listening to this talk about domain-specific pre-training for vertical search scenarios, and I want to conclude with a few takeaways. The first is that biomedicine offers a domain that exemplifies the challenges of vertical search. The second is that domain-specific pre-training offers a viable approach to supporting vertical search scenarios. And the last is that we invite you to try out Microsoft Biomedical Search. Thank you.